Thank you very much for allowing me to attend this conference. It's been fantastic over the last day and a half. I feel like there's nothing left for me to say. We've heard from wonderful speakers from University of Michigan, University of Washington, University of Virginia, our technology friends here, HSBC, Chris Handley, who is my predecessor at Aga Khan. So they've said a lot of interesting stories. They've given you a lot of history. They've talked to you about technology. They've talked to you about what they do. They talk about data, and I'm not going to dwell on some of those. I'll touch them, but it's all been said. But what's the role of the CIO? And there was a question this morning about what does it take to be a CIO? Can I be trained? You can, but it takes a period of time. And I think, as was accurately said by Shaka, it's a lot about experience and a journey. So I'm going to take you on a journey for maybe 30 minutes, and we're going to go a little bit how a sailing boat goes. It goes with the wind, so sometimes you might think we're a little disjointed, but it's going to get us to the end. So I'd like to start, if I can get technology to work. What is digital transformation? So it's about social media, it's about clouds, about mobility, big data, Internet of Things, cybersecurity. But it's actually rethinking how an organisation uses technology, people and processes to enable greater performance and ultimately improve customer service. Now, we spoke this morning about lean technologies, operational excellence, and yesterday we were talking about HSBC and that. Organisations can choose to be customer excellent, product excellent, or operationally excellent. Banks often tend to be customer excellent. Digital transformation is driven by these various technology trends. But there are others that underpin this. Because in order to have some of these things, we also need skills, we need people. Technology is coming along the road with me. It's coming along the road with me. Yeah. So the role of the CIO, as we heard this morning from the panel, has various meanings in different organisations. I like to think of a CIO's role as strategic. And there was a quote this morning that any CIO should be coming along and say, I'm a leader, I transform, and I want more money. But our role is really strategic. We need to set direction. We need to set direction for the organisation around information and the technology components that underpin it. We, certainly I am, in the game of information. Information sharing, and information is an asset. And how do we get value out of that asset? So if we look at where we are in a future society, we can see here, and I'm going to have to walk, so hopefully you can still hear me. Can you? I'll take the mic with me. There we go. So I know this is a little hard to see, but this is coming out of HP in Japan and some studies, but transitioning to a future society. So way back here, in the early days, we were the hunter-collectors. We moved through the industrial era in the third figure there. About mid-20th century started along the information technology, and then we're moving forward into what we call 5.0. So 4.0 to 5.0. I feel like I've been on the journey of digital transformation for a long time. The grey hair might give it away, but I've seen a lot of things. And digital transformation is not just about today. It's not about the future. We've been on it for a while. We've been on about big data. We've been on about devices. We've been on about different types of media affecting us. So it is really about a journey that's been going on for many, many years, even decades. And in different sectors, it's been going on for a lot longer. I can take you back to the aviation sector. The aviation sector's been on this journey for many, many decades. Banking has been on this journey for many decades. Healthcare has actually been on the journey for many decades. Healthcare, which I'll come to in a minute, has some of the best technology running around. It's always had it. It's innovative. It has to be to actually diagnose problems. And if we look at this, we are moving from a current information society, which brings cloud, from what we call a 4.0 to a 5.0, where it's more cyberspace, big data, AI, and I won't go into that. The question for us as CIOs is, how do we ensure our organisation keeps up and services the new world? That's our challenge. Technology is not my strength, as my youngest daughter tells me. So I'm going to skip that one. So, in order to get strategic, we need to understand the digitalization trends. Customer interfaces are digitized. We heard yesterday on the technology, new technology trends. Today we touch. In the future we won't need to touch. We won't be swiping. There are technologies that have been around for many years, more so in the military space, which are visual, that are starting to come forward into the commercial space. So our interface and how we deal with things, more voice. One of the things we're doing a lot more in healthcare is voice recognition, voice dictation, taking away that, that touching of keyboards. One of the challenges in healthcare is doctors always say, I still need a keyboard and a mouse. We want to move from that into voice and video, where we're capturing stuff and using instructions to drive systems. Data is stored on a huge scale, analysed and made available by big data. Our friend at University of Washington this morning spoke about big data. We've heard about it in a range of other areas. We've always had lots of data. I used to work in the aviation sector, working around aircraft. The weight of the aircraft, the aircraft could only fly when the weight of documentation equaled the weight of the aircraft. That's what it took to service and maintain it. Then you generated all the data from the in-flight systems, and you keep going. So we've had it, and we've had it in transactional systems from banking. We've had it in manufacturing systems. We've had it from years ago in SCADA systems, from process control. But we're getting it on a larger scale because as we moved into the digital world, it's coming. It's coming in all forms. We as a CIO need to understand what we're going to do. Mobile data access is enabled by the devices, as we've heard Neil talk about. More and more devices are wanting access to data and how we deal with that and the various implications of those devices. They're not all the same interface. They're not all the same operating system. We have to deal with them. We have to present data in multiple forms. Our systems have got to be designed to deal with those things. Digital business models are set up. As we heard yesterday from David's here, we were talking about the e-commerce model in the village of 50,000 people. As someone said, a village of 50,000? That's more like a small town or a city. But those things are happening, and they're happening, and we as CIOs have to deal with those new models. How are we going to play? We have open source communities and crowdsourcing you use for projects. And we get that even in the healthcare and the academic side, where they're getting people together to drive innovation. AI, 3D printing, and network systems used for production. I first came across AI in the late 80s in the military. I was a civilian contractor, but it was there to analyse data coming off aircraft and helicopters to determine should it go back in the air. Right? Very early forms. 3D printing. We've all heard of it. It's fantastic even in the medical field. Orthopedics. Knees, bones, they can do all sorts of things, hips. So these are all things that are happening that we see. How do we deal with it as a CIO? So I'll just briefly touch into the trends in healthcare. So we spoke about other trends. Top 5 digital transformation trends in healthcare. Telemedicine. You can read that. More than 80% of doctors surveyed said telemedicine is a better way to manage chronic disease. I think yesterday we were talking about from the University of Michigan. We have doctors don't want to go rural. So if you can, as I said yesterday, I'm from Australia, very large country, large areas of remoteness. We struggled getting doctors to go there. Working in Pakistan, getting people to go places. But it's changing. The trend is telemedicine can deliver capability for doctors to practice anywhere. They can be in a rural community and service people to get their revenue streams up by playing in the telemedicine world. Because they just have their bookings are for people on a video conference as against coming through the front door. It offers patients and healthcare providers a new wave of freedom. Mobility and cloud. 85% of doctors use smartphones and medical apps, accessing drug information. Gone are the days of paper charts and file rooms. I've got to tell you, that's the trend, but that's not where we are. And I'll tell you right now, even in the USA, where they've spent billions of dollars, they still have paper records in a lot of places. The developing world still has paper records. If there's a message for Kyrgyzstan in a digital world, it is go digital as quickly as possible. Right? We in the Aga Khan University, our hospitals, we're not fully digital. We have paper. I could show you pictures of containers full of paper, people transporting patient records on motorcycles across town. right? That's the reality. Medicine has progressed massively, but the humble chart is still there. And we need to progress. Cloud access, more and more people are pushing stuff into the cloud. That's the trend. It challenges in a range of areas like it will for Aga Khan in the jurisdictions we operate in, but it's part of our journey. Wearables and IoT, once again, we see these in all sectors. Mobile devices are small, can do ECGs. One of the problems with ECGs is waveform analysis, but we're now using more digital form. Blood tests, they service thermometers. They can remind you to check your weight, your pulse, and your oxygen levels. They're being used in all forms. The challenge is, I think as we heard earlier, is there are so many devices, it's the accuracy of that information. And most devices that are being used in the healthcare sector need to be certified. They are either FDA certified or in other sectors, TGA, so for Australia. So they've got to be in that space so we know they are accurate, they're providing the right information, and they haven't, and nobody's changing them. And in the neonate section, a lot of the information there is actually proprietary. So it's not actually sitting there in the IoT world. And they transmit results to doctors in real time. All of these devices are transmitting information constantly. Even wearable devices such as a cardiac monitor, which has a telemetry, which patients wear in a cardiac ward so they can walk freely around, is transmitting large volumes of data, which we need to understand in case the patient goes into cardiac arrest. So they can walk an entire campus. And we need to make sure it's accurate the whole time and we can see the patient. Sometimes they wear it and they go out and have a cigarette, by the by. And then we move into, so there's a lot of data coming at us and we need to understand what we're doing, even patient monitoring. Artificial intelligence and big data, I'm not going to go there because we are generating large scale amounts. I say patient monitoring data is constant. We're pulling data from a whole range of other feeds. What are we going to do with it? As we heard this morning, I think 0.5% of 40 zettabytes is analysed or used, and only another 0.5% of that is actually analysed properly. So we have to cater for that data because we need a lot of the physiology data. We need the reports of what they found, but the physiology data is important to us, especially in radiology, because we need the data to do comparisons. If we have a prior in radiology of a chest x-ray with showed cancer and they come in 6 months later, if we have a prior and we can compare to, the confidence level in the diagnosis goes to about 95%. Without a prior, it's much lower. So it's important for us to maintain this data, and that continues to grow. Empowered customers. This is the next big trend. All of the above have led to an entirely new trend in healthcare. The customers are now in control. In a lot of countries, the customer can determine where they will go on a price basis. They will shop. We tend to see a lot of this in the US world. It's starting to happen in other locations. So now in the driver's seat, they want better access to the higher quality doctors and higher satisfaction rates overall. And they look at healthcare differently. They want to be in control of their records. They want access to this information. They're the ones saying, you can see it, doctor. Or you can see it. And they want that, and they want to take it, and they want it to be portable. So, all of those things require us to have a skillful workforce, which I'm going to come back to. So, I'll go back to getting strategic. We are witnessing an ever-increasing change in what is available to support organisations. The trends are becoming much larger than new technology methods and thinking. We are witnessing transformation at a country and now a global level. You can't think within just a single border. You've got to start to think beyond that because you will have people come to you. For instance, in East Africa, in our Nairobi hospital, we've just put in a PET cyclotron. We are now bringing patients from other countries around East Africa and Central Africa instead of them going to Dubai or London or the US. So we need to understand how these technologies and I suppose the demand for the service is driving that. And as a CIO, what do we need to do? The future is progressing towards a convergence between cyber and physical space. So those joining together. Machine learning and artificial intelligence will lead to automation and a much greater information set. So how do we ensure our organisation keeps up and services the new world? Once again, that's the role of a CIO. It's not about, is that Windows server up to date? Have I got enough capacity in the data center? Those are all things which are fundamental, but I've got to be thinking about other things. So, how do we do this? And this is not healthcare now, this is general. We need to understand our current world. These are principles you've all seen and heard before, I'm sure, with the incredible minds in here who are far more experienced than myself, smarter in technology. I'm not actually a technologist, by the way. I prefer to do other things. We need to understand the current world we're in. And then we need to set a vision. Where do we need to go? Where are we wanting to go as an organisation? As I said yesterday, one of those great visions I saw was the Malaysia 2020. I've seen a lot of others as well. But we need as an organisation, as a CIO, to understand this is where we need to go and aligned with where the organisation's going. And sometimes we stretch. Why do we stretch? We need to have paved the road before the organisation gets there. We can't be building the road when the organisation's already there, because it's too late. So the foundational points, we have to have thought through the implications. We need to understand the knowledge that's required. And knowledge is about the types of skills we need and the people. So one of the things we are doing at Aga Khan, and we've used elsewhere, is in the information world, there's a thing called the Skills Foundations for the Information Age. And it's a series of skills which are laid out across the various disciplines that you can use to assess your capability and competencies against. It's used in about 170 countries. It actually helps you to understand the competencies in your workforce and how you need to improve them to move forward in time. And this deals with a whole range of people. But we need to understand the type of knowledge we need to take ourselves here. The types of areas that we're going into, the types of technologies, but where the business is going. And then we need to understand the enablers. What will enable us to get there? So these are the things which I sit and I talk to my team about. Where are we? And assess it across all disciplines. Process, people, technology, systems. Where is the business? Have they thought this through? What are their requirements? Where do we think we need to be? Then we need to build the blueprints and the roadmaps to define the various points along that journey. When do we want to be there? What's our capability look like? I've got about 12 minutes left. As I say, knowledge and enablers. These are the key things from a CIO's perspective that you need to be thinking about. Right? And you need a solid team behind you to take you there. And when I talk about current state, I talk about the areas around security. As we heard from this morning around cybersecurity, there's a whole range of things which we've got to build into this current state and understand the future. And I'll come back to some of those principles as we move forward. So when we look at transformation, is the CIO in the digital transformation or is it the transformation? Because this is about, digital transformation is one thing, but we're transforming the organisation. My job as a CIO is to drive change, is to transform the organisation. I see myself as a change agent. I lead and I mentor, but I see myself as the person who has to drive change. I have to live it. As I heard this morning, we were talking about operational excellence. I have to walk it. I have to be out there on the line talking to people about why we should be doing this. I facilitate the change. That's the role of the CIO. So if I look at what are the do's, so let's start let's talk about the bottom right. We need to publicly communicate what is being done and regularly measure it. We need to communicate, communicate, communicate. That's part of our job. We need to have courage and take controlled risks and measure and reward. You know, part of the change in how we are moving forward is, as I said, about people and skills, is about how we remunerate and how we retain our talent or how we acquire, grow and retain talent. Those are challenging things in the world that we live in this environment. In Kyrgyzstan, in Pakistan, in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, these are all challenges. And we need strategies on this journey as to how we're going to deal with that skill and people. The organisation must drive transformation, not our vendors. We don't need a technology vendor or a system vendor telling us how to drive this. We are responsible for this organisation to take it forward. We leverage what they can provide to us, but this is our organisation. We need to drive it. At the end of the day, the vendor will say, here's a solution, but they're not going to tell you how to change your organisation. They can't do that. We need to develop and maintain a joined-up strategy across the organisation. Once again, it's not just about information, the world of digital. It's about people. We're going to do things, and we need a HR strategy which is going to come along the journey. How we acquire, how we remunerate, how we classify people, how we drive training. Well, these are all things, as well as where we put people from a facilities perspective, but how we bring that together as a cohesive piece. That's the role of the CIO, is to actually talk about those levers that have to come on the journey, because the organisation won't pick it all up. The CIO is to have the systemic view of what's about to happen. And all improvements, initiatives and spending must be aligned. We talk about portfolio management and investment management. That's part of the role of the CIO. Thank you. So, there's some of the do's. In order to do this, we also set some principles. Now, these are principles which I haven't just, sort of invented. I've used them in other environments, and they're more about it, as I say, it's about an information sharing, because that's what the CIO is about. It's about taking things from silos and making it accessible, but also sharing. Right. So we've developed some, oops, gone too far. Oops, so I didn't get the right slide. Did you pick up? Okay. All right. No, I think there's a slide missing. It's okay. Is that this morning's presentation? Okay. All right, I'm going to come back to the principles. So, how do we drive transformation? So we've set up a whole range of wonderful things. We see it, transformation's driving at us externally, as we talked about social media, we talked about wearables, Internet of Things, big data. But how do we continue to drive transformation? Because we live in a very intelligent organisations. UCA is an intelligent organisation. The Aga Khan's intelligent organisation. Michigan, Virginia, Washington, HSBC, all of these places are very intelligent organisations. You don't just wait for it to come to you. There's enough drive internally to drive transformation. So we actually, and what I tend to do is I've used this before, we've set up a little, I suppose, planning. How do we plan for and how do we get ideas? And we actually do this, and I wish I had the paper under the chairs that we had this morning. So this is an exercise I run about how far we can go from a transformation perspective. This will all be in the slide pack. So what I typically do is I'll run what I call the A4 flight challenge. So we all sit down and we get a piece of A4 paper. We record on the page who you are, what you explain digital transformation to you, make an aircraft, and then we all throw it. We see a lot of air traffic, and then we pick it up and we write it down. So everyone has an opportunity to participate, explaining what it is. And then we take that. Ooh, that didn't come out very well, did it? Let me see. There it is. My fault. So, from a digital transformation, we get an ideas factory. What is transformation, and what are the ideas that the organisation has? Because lots of people come with ideas, and it's not the job of the CIO to be the only ideas or innovation point. We are listening. We are a listening post for the organisation, and we are looking to gather ideas. So we're looking for outcomes. What is an outcome that the organisation wants to achieve? And as we look inside those outcomes, we need to understand, well, what would enable that to occur? And we need to break it down and understand the requirements for that. And there was a discussion, I think it was yesterday, about how we move forward in organisations and how does the business drive. Very much about the business needs to define what its requirements are, what it's trying to achieve. So we need to understand what are the enablers. And we also need to understand governance. And I think yesterday there was discussion and various components about governance. Governance is fundamental in how you move things forward in organisations. Where can decisions be made? Who's engaged in those decisions? And how do we make that work? And how do we bring it to fruition? Who participates in this space? Who are the players that need to be brought to bear? And as we talked this morning about data science, it is not just one small group. I'm bringing together applications, I'm bringing together technology, I'm bringing together math people to formulate ideas, and I'm not necessarily doing it inside the one organisation. I'm partnering beyond. I'm collaborating with others to help drive this transformation. And I need to bring industry, because industry is a part of where I will come up with ideas and innovations, and I now need to take it from a concept to something which can be productized or brought to bear. We do a lot of work in our own. We've got a group, CCITT group. They do hackathons, but they try to come up with devices. We have an e-health research group who are go out there and they look at ideas. They've come up with a camera scanning of instrument trays, so we can understand what instruments went into the theatre and did the same instruments come out. So we've come up with ways to do that. It's very much prototype, but how do we now make that into a commercial product? How do we take that and potentially, is it intellectual property which we can now drive patents towards? So, what's that, 2 minutes? 5 minutes? Jeez, going pretty well. So we use this ideas factory. Now, I'll go back because I don't think the next slide is really the end of it. Yeah? Good man. One of the things we tend to do around principles is we design with security and privacy inherent in everything we do. So I go back to some of the discussion this morning. Privacy and security is inherent in our design. And I had a discussion this morning. We were talking about some of those principles around GDPR. Some of those principles about data protection, systems, that. If we were talking about what I call the maturity level of systems development, and we were at level 7, and because there's multiple layers, we would have already done that. Right? We would have been through that journey and had security as fundamental as part of our design. So we design for that. We share data. And a lot of what we're sharing is so that it's accessible. By that, we are not reassembling data. We do not believe in the concepts and our principles of putting all the data in one central location. We need data to be discoverable and consumable. So if I go back to the discussion this morning on data science here in University of Washington, pointers out to various data, we call them islands or silos, but we don't assemble it into one big place. So we need to know how to go and find it. We need to get metadata to help us answer the questions we want to do. Fundamentally, we need policy, and we need public policy and build that in to things we're doing from a security, but also to ensure that our citizens and our customers and our consumers understand that we are protecting their information. We design it for many people. When we do something, we don't design it for a small group. We design it for many people, for many different aspects. So these are key principles that we put in place in order to take ourselves on this roadmap or this journey forward. And ultimately, we partner with a lot of organisations, and a lot of people want to partner with us. In order to participate in those relationships, we need to be accountable so that we are complying with policy, we are complying with regulation, and we are being good corporate citizens. So when, say, we have a relationship with the University of Washington and others, if they want to access our data, and the University of Virginia, correct? So when they want to touch our data, they want to know that our information has got integrity. What are the data points to it? But that it is protected, right? And who's had access to it, and has it been audited? They don't want to play with us if we can't demonstrate those criteria to them. So we have to be accountable when we have these relationships to share information. We also, when we protect data, we must protect the identifiable data at the highest level. But we do need to enable people to query data at an anonymized layer and have different layers of protection. So these are fundamental principles that we have built in to our way forward. And I've used these principles in my other life, which I haven't spoken about. But these are things which, have been going on for years, and this has been part of the journey. So I know we've been on this little journey. I think the 30 minutes are up now, and I told you I'd take everybody on a bit of a way around the world. As I said, I'm from Australia. I'm from the land down under, and we were, as I think yesterday we were chatting about various things. We're a colony of criminals. Is that right? Everyone was exported there. We haven't taken anything. We've had things try to be stolen from us. But it's been wonderful to be here. I hope you found it interesting. It is an interesting journey. I talked a little bit about healthcare, but these principles are the same no matter where you go. The journey of the CIO brings on grey hair, brings on all sorts of other issues, but that's what we have to do. That's what a CIO does. Thank you.